moving from automation to more autonomous execution. The real question is not really if it is going to disrupt, the sector. Not sure if all of you heard Vinod Khosla earlier today. He made a remark at AI Summit that in the next 4 to 5 years, BPO and IT services is going to just disappear. So the question really is how India is going to leverage this tech wave to its advantage in creating additional new jobs, near revenue streams from AI, and of course strengthen its position in the global market, global services economy. So before we jump into Q&A, I would like the panelists to quickly briefly introduce themselves. So Swapna, let's start with you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Swapnil Bhatnagar. I'm a partner with Avasant. I lead the overall research practice here at Avasant. Been an industry analyst for more than a decade and have been a part of several service provider organizations on the strategy side prior to that. So extremely interested in how this sector is going to transform with this new upcoming wave.
Thank you, the Avasan team, for having me here. Jagdish Mitra, incidentally, has spent most of my life on the side that you're talking about, Chandrika. I was the Chief Strategy and Growth Officer till 2024 April of Tech Mahindra, and I was responsible for a company that we acquired called Satyam, and therefore their P&L. So, and since then, I have started an agentic AI company, which is on the other side of the discussion about how to drive it with products. I'm very excited to have this conversation. Not qualified enough to make predictions to say whether 5 years it will last or two. I think that's a meaningless debate. I'm also on the board of something very important to India, which is the NSDC, the National Skill Development Corporation. And I think that has a critical role to play as we go forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Chandrika, for having me. My name is Somnath Chatterjee. I used to be a partner in McKinsey for many years, served a lot of tech services companies, and saw this opportunity to create a vertical AI company focus on tech services. We call ourselves Prism Force. It's like a Prism on workforce. Nearly 30 leading tech services companies in India and abroad use our platform for talent management, skills, and resource management in particular. Very excited to speak, and I do think that it's a net new opportunity for most Indian companies and not so much of a threat.
Hi, everyone. My name is Akshay Khanna. Thanks for joining us today. I'm a managing partner at Avasant. We are a global consulting firm, and it is really our pleasure to host this session today on what's the future and what's the imperative for tech-enabled services. In terms of my role, I've spent over 2 decades in this industry, both, like Jagdish said, on the service provider side, being a provider of services to global clients, and then for the last 15, 16 years plus, as an advisor to global organizations who are looking to either outsource their services to large tech services companies or even set up their own centers here in India. So that gives us a unique perspective on what and how clients are looking to consume these tech services. And then also on the other side, we work and interact quite a bit with tech services companies, BPO companies. So hopefully through this, would look forward to sharing some of the perspectives that we've had and what it means for India as a country, and then the growth opportunities that lie ahead. So
Right. So let me just start with you, Akshay. So India has built its IT dominance on labor arbitrage, right? And with now AI, compressing the time required to do the job, do you see that it's going to erode our, you know, fundamentally erode our advantage, or is it going to transform it into something new?
So I think you shared some numbers in the beginning, right? Today, this industry is very, very fundamental to Indian economy, with about 6 million people directly employed and many, many more indirectly employed. It's been a big employment generator in the last 2 decades plus. Uh, it's also close to about $280 billion worth of revenue that this industry generates. But it was not always this case, right? So now we take labor as a given, but if you go back 25 years ago when Y2K, which was the big pivotal moment for this industry had less than 300,000 people employed. It had less than I think $4 to $5 billion worth of revenue in this industry. So we've had a massive growth in the last 25 years, almost a 55x growth when it comes to revenue. So of course, I think cost has been a big aspect for clients in the US, Europe geographies where they're looking at cost and labor arbitrage is a big given. But what is, I think, what we've built as an industry is not just a very highly scaled up, a talent pool. Clearly, about 6 million people they have expertise in different technologies, different industries, all of that. So that's a big advantage. But along these 25, 30 plus years, we've also built a lot of process expertise, right? So these individuals, these 6 million plus people, have a lot of process and domain expertise when it comes to their clients. And then also they have a lot of information and intelligence on how these um, workflows and these organizations inherently work, right? So to say that I think labor is the only advantage we have is I don't think fundamentally true. We do have a lot of other advantages when it comes to the process, the domain, the organizational nuances and all of that. So those are on the advantages, but now what do we do with it is I think from here to the next 5 years to 10 years and so on. So I think there is a lot of opportunity. I don't think this just goes away because an agent replaces a human that is working today, because at the end of it, when we are dealing with large global organizations, like the Citibanks and the JPMCs of the world or Walmarts of the world, I think there is a lot of process knowledge, organizational knowledge that's required. There's a lot of integration that's still required to their legacy systems. I don't think they're going away still. So I think the opportunity is to capitalize on these expertise and this experience that we've built collectively, but to build upon that and then kind of build this kind of agentic layer and an AI enablement through it.
Right. So Akshay's POV is, we are shifting from general, labor force to a more specialized, labor. So with would love to get your comments also on the same question. And how do you see the skilling impact with AI also coming into the
Sure.
picture?
I do think that over the last 25 years, one of the biggest drivers of the movement of market share to Indian players has been on the back of better delivery competitiveness, but that's not the only one. Having said that, I think it will require significant reimagination. The good thing is that India is still a mini attacker in the space, right? India has hardly 20-25% market share. It's a very large space. It's like a $1.8 trillion give or take, right? And if you add the full potential of R&D outsourcing, BPM outsourcing, it will be running into a few more trillions, right? So we are still scratching the surface. There are like areas like analytics, there are areas like RCM, which is growing at 20% plus, while there would be some areas. Now the battle will happen at the service line level. There will be some areas like the usual traditional application support, application maintenance, which the lower end work will get taken away by AI. And it's not something new. It has been chipping away since the age of RPA, since the age of automation. But this is very fundamentally different to the extent that the biggest advantage was people, and here it's people plus agents which will do the work. I know the nature of work will shift into more of orchestration of work rather than doing the work or the coding themselves, which I think is a big shift. I do believe that probably the pecking order might change. It's not like just because someone has been very successful over the last many years, that gives you the right to be equally successful going forward. So just like any other disruption, tech disruption in particular, right? It will be advantage of an attacker. It will be the advantage of people who will move more faster, more nimbler. Probably the smaller players who are able to pivot faster, because it does require a fair bit of change management on the provider side. And as Akshay also said, like enterprises are very large organizations. It's not just about coding. It's not just about systems. It's the trust many of these players have built over a period of time. They've been accountable to certain business outcomes, even if the contracting model was TNM, but actually they were delivering some outcomes through technology. That is not going to shift away. And all said and done, AI is still a very much a point solution. You need someone to just orchestrate some of these solutions to have business impact. And that's where if you can harness the kind of skills that Indian ID companies particularly have possessed over the many years, just that they may not have fully harnessed that. Much of the work is still very resource based. But I think this could be the pivotal moment for us to reimagine and probably grab even more market share.
Right. So with this whole wave of agentic AI, Jagdish, I think it's fair to say that India is no longer the cost, center of the world, right? And so, just reflecting on your previous role at Tech Mahindra, would love to get your inputs, what service providers or IT firms need to do to stay indispensable, and what are those two or three structural shifts that you expect from Indian firms to take in the next 2 to 3 years to stay competitive?
Sure, Chandrika. Um, Firstly, I think this whole labor arbitrage, cost advantage thing is overstressed because um, this is a market now open to all. You see GCCs coming here. You see not just Indian, system integrators who started from here, like the likes that I represented earlier, but enough international ones having bigger volume of people here. So the competitive landscape for us in the market is not driven by only Indian guys, but it's also driven by a large number of people taking advantage of the talent pool that's here. The question to ask is this talent pool relevant for future? I think. To me, I think that's the big question, and I'll be a little sort of controversial here, though I think I, as I said, I can't comment whether it'll, there's been enough comments from Anthropic CEO. There's been a comment from the Microsoft CTO a few days back, and there's been a comment from, uh, sorry,
IBM also, they're
IBM,
hiring. Yeah,
or all of these guys. Everyone said 4 years, 3 years, 5 years. I don't know how they do the math, but it's difficult for me to predict whether it will be a number of years. But it's really going to, the whole model is going to turn upside down for sure. So businesses have to be ready to address it now without having a crystal ball which says it will happen in 2 years or 3 years. But it will happen for sure. And obviously, like anything else in business, in automation, like, we talked about RPA, etc., the lowest hanging fruits are the ones in the bottom of the pyramid, which is in our IT services model, the large number of labor force, the large number of people we hire from graduate engineering colleges, and therefore we created so many engineering colleges in India. Those things are going to go through a complete toss. And I think it'll probably, that model is not going to exist. I don't know when, but definitely not too far away. Now, the question to ask ourselves is that how do we prepare ourselves to be still ready and be able to relevant? That's where I think you need to dig down a little deeper and say, what was the core competency of a system integrator? What did they bring to the table? Like Akshay said, they brought in a lot of process and domain knowledge, not just as process consultants, but how one system talks to the other. What does the financial system do? What does a bank's core banking system do? What's a telecom company's billing system do? And how does it work with each other? Is the core knowledge that we created. Yes, we needed programmers, so we had by the millions of it. That piece will definitely go away. I mean, one of the things that in my company that we are doing is also trying to take away the fact that it will not about taking people out. It's about delivering the best value from the product. And it'll automatically take the vagaries of human variability out of the discussion. So from my perspective, it will be important for the two structural changes that to your question that IT companies need to do is to really open arm adopt the innovation culture of bringing in products inside their company. They haven't got to be made by them. That's a big mind block for any technology company, especially the Indian ones who think that why can't I do it? And that's where the biggest block is. I think there is some structural change at the leadership that needs to be done. Again, from my vantage point at TechM, what happens is if you bring in someone with a group which is building products or platform, this old management adage lies, does he get a seat on the center table? If he doesn't get a seat on the center table, then he's one lab experiment. That lab experiment will remain a lab experiment, will always be compared as how much revenue, how many billing hours, how much utilization, and that's such a wrong metric for the new world. So that's the first structural change. Second structural change is very clearly tell the market very clearly that we're going to redefine this business. And the redefinition of the business is 3 years, 4 years journey. You can't suddenly take a 200,000 people company, 300,000 people company and say, okay, next year I'll be 100,000, but I'll deliver the revenue. So that telling the market very boldly that you're going to transform and it is a time frame to do it and you'll put your money where your mouth is the second structural change.
I agree with your point of doing away with traditional ways of benchmarking performance. Swapnil, what are those two, three recommendations?
Yeah, I think agree with all the points, but uh, the angle that I would want to take on this, and this is something that the services companies really need to accelerate. I think we've been talking about outcome-based pricing and those kind of things, taking responsibility for business metrics of the clients. I think a lot of that has just been talk so far. I think at the fundamental level, at the end of it, we kind of revert back to the way we know this industry works. We see that almost in every contract that we help clients with, right? We start off day one, the client is extremely, and the service provider is very clear that okay, I'm going to try to get some outcome based pricing. But by the time it reaches the procurement cycle, the service provider himself or itself does not push for it and reverts back to some existing models. This has been going on, this cycle has been going on for many years now. This is the point where that cycle needs to break, because if it doesn't break, it'll have a fundamental impact on the entire service provider industry at this point of time. So I think the big structural shift is taking more responsibility of business outcomes. It's always been a challenge in defining outcomes. That's where it's typically stalls, right? How do you define an outcome? How do you agree between a service provider and the client on what is an outcome? What should be the value? Now I think those problems need to be solved, and that's the big structural shift. I think the second one, kind of associated, I think Jagdish mentioned product based. We've seen situations where products are built by the service providers and only those products are taken to market, and then under the pressure from the enterprises, you don't charge for it, you subsume it under the services umbrella. That's no longer the case. I think you can't do it. And to your point, Jagdish, I think it's not just, you have to be more secular about it. It doesn't need to be your own product that you've created. It can be the other products which are already making a mark in the market. And I think those are the big two structural changes that I think service providers will have to push for. I don't know if it's 2 years, 3 years, but they will have to do it.
So just changing the gears a bit, speaking of workforce transformation. Maybe Akshay, help me answer this. That India's IT, services sector, they have banked a lot on the pyramid model, which means large base hiring at the bottom, right? Now, if with the help of AI co-pilots or digital agents, a lot of that work is going to get subsumed, by the software. What does this new model look like now? And also, I think IBM just everybody was using agentic AI. I think IBM started was the first one of the first ones in the industry who said, "I'm going to reduce the workforce by X%." And I think just 3 4 days ago, they made a statement that they're going to hire more at the bottom of the pyramid, the Gen Zs. They're going to increase it by 1/3 in the US. So, is the industry coming back to its senses, or what's going on?
So I think, as everybody said, we are in a time of profound change. It is a what I would call a, at least from an Indian IT perspective, because it's been a big employment generator for us right from campuses. We've had an entire generation of engineering graduates. It didn't matter whether they were civil engineers, mechanical engineers; they were all going into tech. So we've built this again huge 6 million plus workforce. So in some ways, this is a do or die moment for the Indian IT industry. Because um, as so again, I think there's a couple of different vantage points I want to take. One is from a India as a country, we have one of the highest population of youth. We're going to colleges. Uh, their skilling is a different, question altogether. But they need jobs when they come out of these engineering colleges and other colleges and so on. So if the hiring starts to slow down, which it has, I think if you look at the tech services industry, we've not hired as many people as we used to in the recent years, but we've continued to grow on the revenue side. So at least there is some decoupling happening, but it puts pressure on where will these youth find employment opportunities, and that has to be figured out, whether it's in software, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in semiconductors. So I think that's a whole different issue that we do need to solve. As far as I think the tech services companies themselves are concerned, you're right. I think it has been a pyramid model. So a big part has been on how do we hire some of these entry level graduates, entry to mid level graduates. train them. These We've built a great training infrastructure across different organizations, and then deploy them on these projects, and by as a result of that, keep also the costs pretty much in check. We do ongoing pyramid refresh, redeployment, move from project to project, and all of that. Clearly, the entry level tasks, as we all see in our own day to day life, you can do away with a lot of entry level tasks by putting it into Claude or ChatGPT or Claude Work or whatever. So there is that pressure, which means that the mid-level managers or seniors are able to get done a lot of, I mean, they're able to do a lot of work using these platforms, right? So I was speaking to another founder of a SaaS company. About 50 to 60% of their code is now written through AI, right? So you don't need as many entry level engineers. So it is, to your point, turning the pyramid model upside down. It will create maybe a diamond shaped model, but then very quickly, I think what organizations who have started lowering the hiring at the entry of the base of the pyramid, is also that when you have too many highly paid or moderately to highly paid mid-level managers, that's also a pressure on the cost point there, and they will need to manage that also quite a bit. So I think, to that IBM, there is, I think, some uh, maybe there is some coming back to senses, because they're feeling that they can empower the lower to mid quite a bit. And um, and then I think the challenge will become, because in India definitely we have a lot of this mid-level managers. How do we enable them to have that knowledge of enterprise, and then leverage that to build agentic workflows or build agentic software? So that, I think, it's jury is still out. Again, we're not predicting any. I think that's the consensus. We're not predicting, but there is a lot of pressure, definitely, on that.
So irrespective, whether the talent structure is a diamond, or a pyramid, that's, for sure that the roles are going to get redefined, right? So in your experience, I mean, what's your vision for the next gen reskilling, of the workforce? What are those new jobs that could land in the market? We're already seeing the rise of, agentic AI officers, chief AI officers, and so on. But that's, at the top level. But at the bottom level, also, we have Gen AI consultants, agentic AI, ethics engineers, and so on. So, what's your take on that?
No, clearly, I think because agent is not the full solution, you need agent plus humans. What will become more and more important would be like some of those back to basic skills like problem solving, creativity, asking the right questions. For that matter, like coding is probably only 20% of the work which Indian IT companies, for that matter, any IT company does. A lot of the work goes in actually understanding the requirement, understanding what will it take to create that impact in the context of the business. Of course, it's a collaboration between the client and the provider. It's not one way or the other, but some of those skills will probably become more and more important, domain skills for that matter, right? So probably the value will get created at the intersection of domain and technology. Now the challenge is the domain knowledge might be more for people who have been there, done that, seen the B2B landscape, the intricacies of the other system, because systems are not in isolation. Whereas many of the Gen Zs, for example, might be much better in vibe coding because that's the only thing that they have learned while in the third year, fourth year, and that's it's just a very new thing. And for someone who is in the mid level, right, like for him or her, they will have to unlearn a lot of what they have learned earlier. Having said that, even vibe coding requires a fair bit of like code review. You require a fair bit of supervision because you can't just let that go to production. Even if that code goes to production, once things fail, and things do fail in IT services, there are lots of bugs, then you'll not be able to find out like what really went wrong, right? So I think the team structures would change. There'll be I'm seeing across clients, some clients are going after retraining at scale, rethinking scaling in a big way. One of our clients are putting like not just the carrots but stick, like you'll have 40 to 50% weightage on performance management based on how well you have done on capability building. Why? Because if you don't do it right, like my cost structures will keep going up, and there's only so much hiring we could do because those skills don't exist. You have to build those skills internally, and the best thing to do that is to like reskill talent at scale. But I would agree that it's if the technology as aggressively pushing this agenda as it is, right? There are some companies like Accenture, they have even talked about reinvention of services, they've reorged the complete structure, they're thinking about the roles of the future. I am seeing across companies, people are rethinking on the future of services. the future of delivery, given that delivery will be a lot more probably platform led, and there's only pockets of work which you'll do more around orchestration, system thinking, design, and so on. So it remains to be seen. But if I were a Gen Z, it's not like I'll be overtly worried. There's still demand. It's not like many of them might end up starting up and they could beat some of these incumbents because the startups do have an advantage because they don't have a legacy to fall back on.
There's like a whole host of newer technologies coming into the market: neurotech, quantum technologies, space tech, robotics, and so on. So I think there's going to be place for everyone, I guess. So I have some stats for you, Jagdish. So roughly 58 to 60 million workers in India are digitally skilled. Yet the country needs to train an additional 30 million in advanced technologies by the end of 2026. So we are quite behind. And at the same time, we spoke about the AI disruption. The disruption cycles are, I think, 3 to 5x much faster than previous tech shifts. So given this scale and speed, can India actually reskill the architecture to keep pace with AI disruption? And how would you recommend India to go about it?
So firstly, I want to take on the first point you talked about the IBM comment because it's been floating around. But I can just draw some two sort of very different shades, and the second one that I'm going to talk about is a real life example of a classmate of mine who's been one of the top first 30 guys in Facebook, or now Meta. And I was chatting with him about what they're doing about AI, as boring computer science people do, and nothing else to talk about. So he was saying that the guideline in Meta for their teams is to do what they did in something that they took 6 months to do it in 6 weeks. And that's not where it stops with half the people. And some teams are delivering it. So that's for real. It's happening. So we need to worry about the fact that if this is the speed at which technology is changing, will these skills be relevant at all? So to the point about your reskilling problem is way bigger than the numbers itself, because some people have sort of in bravado said that we did it during Y2K. That's a very different ball game. The thing changing in AI is at a speed which is not quantifiable by some of us have been here. I know Lata and others who've been here during Y2K know what does a Y2K do. And it was very, very basic. It's really, pardon my French, but it's lower than BPO work. So the that's the work that we did. So that skilling has got nothing to do with the need of the skilling for AI, and that skilling was helped because we had volume. Here, the skilling will need to change drastically because we will need to train people more on how to leverage these new tools. So, to the answer that I think you were making about the skilling of the people, it's very important for us to pick up those engineers who are very conversant with using these tools rather than the fresh ones. So the Gen Z ones that have not equipped themselves with all the coding tools and the ability to do vibe coding or whatever else that they are coming across the new technologies are the ones that will succeed. The ones that are still following the old methodology will fail. So for us as India, the biggest challenge and the biggest probably, and therefore the solution is that we've got to convert our academic institutions from very kind of now outdated models of training people and educating people to actual co-op programs and programs in which they are delivering projects. Jobs will not be created by large companies, but by companies creating small startups and individuals that will create it. But two things I think we can look at positively, that like you said, X million, 30 million digitally trained people, and how do we take them to tier 2, tier 3 and below to the districts and convert that into language based training which is available in those markets using platforms like Bhashini or something like that, will help us drive a larger pace of skilling. Still the skilling seems to be remembered in tier 1 and tier 2. That's the problem that we need to break.
Swapnil?
So I want to take a maybe slightly different view on this, right? I think whose responsibility is it to train someone, right? That responsibility increasingly cannot be outsourced to academic institutions and all of that at this point of time. I don't think we'll ever be now the speed at which technologies are emerging, unless the individuals themselves are driven, as Som also mentioned, right? The skills, this is not a skilling of technology anymore. It is a skilling of can you quickly learn the new technology, apply it, move forward on that, right? So the responsibility of that skilling kind of moves to the individual a little bit more than it was. I think in the past 20 years, it's sort of become, Infosys as a big Mysore campus where, I will not go in with any kind of pre-work, but they will train me enough so that I'm ready for the market. I don't think that's going to fly anymore, right? So that's why I don't want to externalize the problem that this is the government's problem or the academic institutions problem. Yes, I agree. The challenge is that industry, academia, and government need to come together and create some skilling programs. Yes, they will have to continue to do that. But here it is more about the horse will have to go to the well to try to dig the drink the water from it, and it has to become, we have to identify those horses faster and in a more effective manner than the kind of entrance tests and all of those environments that we currently do. So hackathons, multiple other kind of environments are they going to become more important, I believe, as the structural foundations of the training mechanism, rather than in school, in college, in classroom kind of a training environment. And that's a completely different mindset. There is one technology that we have which can help with that, and that's AI. So basically, the AI is the villain here as well, and potentially the hero as well, right? So we have to figure out those mechanisms of choosing the right people, then giving them the weapons, the inputs, the AI tools to help them accelerate that journey for themselves, and then be tested on those rather than old school metrics. So I think that's my view on that.
So, now just again jumping back to a different theme, sovereign AI, which has and is going to be discussed a lot during this summit. So, just want to get everyone's perspective. Maybe Akshay. Uh, so, US is primarily focusing a lot on private capital. They're trying to lead the race for frontier, LLMs. China is fine tuning those AI models to comply with state policy, industrial policy, and so on. Europe is more focused on the regulatory side, right? India has taken a stand on multilingual AI, more on the inclusion, digital public, infrastructure side of things. So, uh, are we in the race? Are we winning the race? Is this a more differentiated approach that India has taken, or are we going to get left behind where AI is more dominated by private capital and geopolitical influence?
So I think there's no option. I think we have to be in the race. Thank you. So I think there's no two options about it. I mean, we have to be in the race. We have to be. I think Honorable Minister also said it. I think a few weeks ago that along with the U.S. and China, who are already the two front leaders in AI and then also in quantum and some of the other emerging tech, India has to be the third alternative, right? And I think a big part of this is this AI Impact Summit, where a lot of participants from Global South and so on are there. We have to play, to your point, on our strengths. We've not uh, just poured a lot of money down, which may not be anyways the effective strategy on creating some of these frontier LLMs and so on with the large GPU clusters and so on. So what's our strength? Our strength is, like you said, I think you also mentioned, is the multilingual aspect of it. I mean, the amount of linguistic diversity that we have in this country, we do need AI to solve some of those challenges from an inclusion standpoint, from a bringing everybody online perspective. We have a fairly large population. US does not have that issue. China, of course, has a big large population. So I think um, India definitely has to continue to up the investment to be a formidable force when it comes to AI at kind of all the multiple layers of AI, whether it's on the application layer, whether it's on the services, whether it's on chips and all of that. And I think I want to dovetail back to Jagdish's point and Swapnil's point. A lot of it goes back to taking the risk-taking mindset that needs to happen both at the organizational level, private sector organizations, as well as the individual level. Right? You have to take control of your own destiny in terms of taking Swapnil your example of, if I'm a college student going student today, I do need to take charge of what I want to do and what I want to learn, because as a lot of people are saying, and I do agree that the day is not far where a 5-10 people company is $1 billion in revenue or multi-billion dollar in revenue and valuation. So I think a lot of risk taking, both at an individual level as well as a private sector organization level. I think government is doing its part in terms of allocating some funds from a deep tech perspective, R&D credits and all of that perspective. But we do need to have that mindset to create and invest into products, and products not just for India, but from India for the world as well.
So,
I do think it's a little bit of a winner take all market when it comes to the large language models, because the kind of capex which is required, they may not even pay for through revenue. So probably that may be out of bounds for us to a great extent. But I think the value will get created at the intersection of domain and technology, and probably for specific problems, right? For example, even in our company in Prism Force, we have built a small language model primarily for skills, and we can beat any of the GPTs out there because they are very generic. So we have to pick our battles, right? There could be a like a portfolio of small language models which we built where we probably have the data, the expertise, the intent, and then we try and monetize that, because ultimately money will get made on the back of B2B workflows, on the back of B2B solutions, and that's where organizations will pay money. And therefore, you would see a lot of the open AIs and the Anthropics of the world are now trying to get into this FD-led model of consulting or quote unquote services, so that they can actually create some impact at the B2B company level, because consumer will only pay so much, right? So ultimately it's the B2Bs who will be paying it, right? Having said that, like I do think that uh, the match is still open, right? You would see the Chinese players without a lot of investments have been able to create models. Even today the most used open source models are the Chinese models, not the US models for that matter, right? So with more progress of science, right, who knows, right? Maybe someone from India can build the next most used models, right, without a lot of capex.
Sarvam, for instance,
Sarvam
has
is already doing that in the multilingual case. They are doing some scale pilots with banks and so on at a much cheaper cost than what the other 11 labs of the world are doing.
so Jagdish, more stats for you. India has seen over 20 billion in AI commitments by late 2025. And it spans over, the sovereign compute, application layer, foundational models, talent, data pipelines, and so on. So with this scale of investment, what measurable outcome would define success for us by 2030? And I mean, is it contribution to GDP, number of foundation models? Like, how do we actually put, KPI around it?
See, the most fundamental one, which is again going back to this friend of mine, the question to him was when he was debating this about impact of AI was, how is AI changing the outcomes in your company? Is it helping you increase your profitability, and what has changed over the number of quarters? And how has it helped you drive revenue forward for you using AI? Same has to be for a sovereign investment as well. So we have to look at it and say, has it actually changed the overall GDP volume? I don't know, there's some number being floated about contribution from AI to about 1.7 trillion coming from all the AI work that happens in India. That's got to be the best and this absolutely the right measure, first of all. Second discussion that we should probably have is, what did it do in terms of creating us to be making more globally competitive companies, whether it's in manufacturing, whether it's in retail, whether it's in banking, because this is our biggest chance. We don't need big infrastructure investments in terms of physical infrastructure. We don't need big brand deployment investments that other brands have done when they've created global brands in the space of manufacturing or retail or whatever else. Now, if you leverage AI to its hold, whether it's 3D manufacturing or whether it's analytics to be done well and digital marketing to be done well, you could leapfrog. And so what we should measure is how many global brands did we create and how do you measure global brands. I think it should hold good for, I have a very big view on this whole celebration about startups, which is great in India. And I think we've done a brilliant job. But no disrespect to the Zomatos and the Swiggies of the world, but they are only creating revenue in India. We need to look at companies which are creating what, thankfully, I know a lot of comma and your question started from it, labor arbitrage and stuff like that for IT services. But the IT services companies brought in humongous amount of foreign exchange inside the company. I think the challenge for us will be to allow those deep tech companies to be created in India, whose 50% of the business comes from outside India. Look at Google's, look at the Microsofts of the world, look at IBM's of the world. They generate more than 50% of their revenue outside America. How do we create that? Should be a very critical measure of our deep tech startup mission, saying how many such companies did we create out of India that are relevant globally.
Everything seems to have been covered here. But I think I'm agree with everything Jagdish you've said, and I think the idea about uh, global companies starting from India, I think that's a great measure. I think for success. But I do want to look at the other side of it, right? Um, and I know I spoke in the previous response about responsibility going to the people and all of that. But then um, we do have the largest young population in the country, which needs to be channelized properly. I don't have a metric at this point of time, but any new technology, at least in our perspective, that comes in, needs to have some way of impacting this pool of young energy that is there in the country, which could very easily take the entire nation in either of those two directions, positive or negative. So while all of the profitability, the revenue, the import of foreign exchange, all of those are great metrics. We will have to have some element or some metric that also looks at how we're engaging or creating opportunities for at scale. Unfortunately, we do need to build some of these things at scale as well, like the IT companies did in the last couple of decades. Yes, this technology is going to most likely shrink some of those workforces, but what are the alternate workforces or opportunities that are going to emerge in the next 5, 10 years? I think that is very important as a nation for us. So that would be, but again, I agree with everything the panel has said so far.
If I could just chime in on to that point and to Jagdish your point, we do need globally competitive, globally relevant, spaces. Advanced tech broadly has to be one of those because of just not just from a employment export perspective, but just from a sovereignty perspective and geopolitical issues that briefly we talked about. So I think the one of the areas, I think the green shoots that at least we have is kind of this entire space tech program that we've had in India. It is one of the globally competitive ones. You see private satellite operators, whether they're in Europe or in the US, they're leveraging ISRO and other facilities here to do these satellite launches. So the lowest cost player is not SpaceX, but it is in India, right? So there is something to be done, said about the frugal engineering part of it, but then also it is globally relevant and it is one of those globally competitive industries.
So, one closing question, to all of you. I mean, India's growth story has, often hinged on timing. We did so well when it came to IT services and so on, and we also know the cost of not jumping at the right time in a technology like we're making up for quantum and other things now. So, as we ride on this AI wave, what is that one capability or a technology that India needs to double down on, in your opinion?
I mean, quick one. I think just to build on what I said earlier, I think the entire advanced tech, deep tech space, from the entire deep tech, advanced tech space for India, I think is super important. So whether it's building from tech to tech products to engineering services, to areas like, I mean, more broadly in AI, space, quantum, robotics. I think we've not even touched about, the entire
Actually,
robotics
you
and
have to pick one.
I mean, I would put it under the entire advanced tech uh, bucket.
I actually believe in doubling down on strengths. It should be AI-based applications because that's where the money will come from. And I am very, very bullish that we will capture this market.
Any specific types? I see a lot of focus on agriculture in today's events. Any
But
specific
that's like
industry or
hardly
vertical?
5% of the global GDP. It has to be on like all the big sectors out there, whether it's BFSI, healthcare, and so on. It should mirror the IT services. If you look at the tech services sector composition, it's all the large sectors. But just that now it will be more around re-architecting old systems because remember, like we have spent like probably $1.5 to $2 trillion every year for the last 20 years. So there's a huge tech debt out there. Who will create the AI versions of that? Right? It's up to us.
Yeah, I think for us it will be important to focus primarily on our ability to be able to create that skill base which converts these business processes and applies our AI to them using the tools, because we started the conversation from there. We have a huge understanding of the business process. If we create that domain skill within this faster, that how do we transform these businesses to the world of AI is where the capability lies with us, and that's what we need to build.
But I think skill development is not the biggest problem. Skill retention is. How do we, work upon that?
From our perspective, I think if you create all the three parts of what we talk about in the summit, in the sense creating the infrastructure, creating the relevant guardrails, and the large language models that we said the sovereign AI will do, you don't have to worry about talent going out, because talent will come to where the quality of work is. And the quality of work will be here if you build those things together.
I beg to differ. There's a lot of because of bureaucracy, low pay grade. I've seen a lot of folks in quantum migrating to China and elsewhere. I mean, firsthand, I've heard it from people building quantum computers, the professors, and so on. So, but maybe that could be just a very tech specific aspect. Yeah.
Yeah. So, so to me, I mean, if we look at it, AI, and again, we've discussed a little bit about how capital intensive AI is at this point of time. So for me, amongst the technologies that you listed down, or the areas that you listed down, quantum computing is the key to actually reduce the capex requirements for AI significantly on the compute side and things like that. So maybe that's one area that could give us that leapfrogging. It's a foundational element for AI. It's a foundational element for a lot of space tech. So I think if we can leapfrog on that, and the example that you took of people moving to another country, it's obviously not a good one for us. But to me, I think something that can be an accelerator across the board, across AI, space tech, and all the other deep tech areas that we're looking at, I think it's going to be quantum. Hopefully we'll start seeing some real world applications outside of cybersecurity pretty soon.
So basically, next gen computing, quantum, and
That's right. Yeah.
neuromorphic computing, and so on. Yeah. Okay. So I hope you had, good insights across. We touched a lot on workforce development, sovereign development, what in AI, beyond AI. So I hope you found this conversation meaningful. Thank you, everyone. Can we take? Do we have time? We have 5 minutes. We can take a question.
So we talked about a lot of things, but generally, like when we talk about AI in general, like the cost is one of the important factors, right? Like I was reading an article today morning that Cursor had done, like gave a vague statement that build a browser for me, and the model ran for a week, and it was able to build a browser for us. Now, for building that browser, it took around trillion tokens, and the overall cost of that particular project itself is around like $14 million, I believe. I mean, at least in terms of OpenAI token cost usage. Now, let's assume people start using all these models. Again, the cost factor will come into play. Like when we talk from workforce management point of view, or when we talk from business point of view, if Claude or OpenAI starts to charge us more, obviously all the cost for developing a single project will kind of grow a lot, right? So how do we think of all those things? Like how do like what is the right kind of investment that we have to make in order to balance the profits and balance the usage of the right technology at the right time. Yeah.
Maybe I can start. It's a very relevant point. We are living through it. To be honest, like unlike SaaS, right, where the marginal cost is very low, relatively low, gross margins can be as high as 70-80%. If you just use AI, just because of the token cost, the gross margins can be even negative, right? The way pricing is happening right now. And the other angle is if you start to build something in agentic AI, the first model that we'll use, which is very cheap, right? But that will not give the right answer. There'll be a lot of alpha beta errors, and you'll have to just go for the improved model. They're like 40-50 times costlier than the other model. But everyone is betting that with more and more usage, there'll be scale, and that will lead to reduction in cost, right? So that's the big hope. There's still hope. Having said that, we saw that in cloud as well, and you can add, right, like with 2 3 only players which are the dominant players, they started increasing cost. So you have to also not just be completely dependent on agentic AI, or for that matter using LLMs, because once there's a concentration of market share with 3 4 players getting to 90%, there is a good chance, because they have to recover the investments. Even today, the kind of investments which is going in, there's no line of sight to even 10% IRR. So there's a matter of time before those costs goes up. So you have to use like it very judiciously. And
I think if I could just add, that- so if I can just add to it, clearly, see, there was even 2 3 years ago, AI was the cure to everything, right? So you start burning through the tokens, the cost goes through the roof, right? What this tells you is a few things. One, just burning tokens is not the solution to every single problem that exists. So you have to be very clear on where that dollar investment needs to go in and what the ROI is, to Som's point, right? Because that ROI will not be there in everything as of today. One bet is that the cost of these tokens and compute and inference and all of that will start to go down, right? And there's a few different layers to it. One is, of course, from the entire investment that's going into the GPUs and so on, and starts to pay off. The second, which we briefly touched upon, is uh, a lot of focus on the open source models, right? I think that's where also a lot of opportunity for India is. I mean, China is putting out a lot of open source models, and does that start to lower your cost of models and using and so forth? So I think there is that opportunity from an India perspective, that can we be even more frugal and kind of mindful on what the cost part of it is.
Good evening, panel. My name is Vineet, and as we have seen here, sir has mentioned that in Meta, the expectation of building something which usually used to take 6 months has been reduced to 6 weeks. So we are building artificial timelines, and we are building artificial race. So the two questions that I want to ask is that, first of all, the placeholders which were initially or traditionally used to be occupied by humans or people will be completely replaced by AI. The second question is that, are we heading towards a systems of system collapse? So because there are so many systems that are developing, we are also building a system that will be that will integrate all of it and work with each other. So are we heading towards that? Thank you so much.
So I think as far as timelines and the jobs that our humans used to do and agents will pick up, that's definitely a trend. That's a reality. But 100%, like we said, is not going to be there because there's a certain amount of design element and there's a certain amount of process knowledge that automatically comes from the human side of experience. So yeah, so even to the point about the coders not getting hired, I think Akshay made the point that slowly and slowly the question is to be asked, saying who will they replace? We had automatically thought that the lowest of the pyramid will go, but it's not maybe the case. The lowest of the pyramid could be smarter by using a set of tools and be more smarter than the middle level. So some disruption is bound to happen, but it shouldn't be taken for granted that the entry level ones will go. That's to your first question. For the second one, it's, I think system of systems or not, the book of records concept will go away. The whole store of records and book of records to be the farthest and the base of doing everything will probably go away because you'll be so dynamic and the agents will be able to pick up that information from different stores, and depending on what you're trying to drive in a CRM application or anything of that nature, or understand your customer, that whole store concept of keeping that records will probably go away.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.